You ever had someone try to steal your land right under your nose using nothing but paperwork and a smile? Yeah, that happened to me. I swear if I ever write a book about my life, chapter one's going to be called The Time My Neighbor Tried to Have Me Arrested for Trespassing on My Own Backyard. Let me back up a sec, because this story's got twists, turns, and more HOA drama than a soap opera. It all started one cool morning, sun coming up, birds doing their thing, and me standing in my backyard holding a hammer and a private property sign. 15 years I'd lived there, paid taxes, mowed the grass, picked up after the neighbor's dog more times than I'd like to admit. But for months, strangers had been cutting through my yard like it was some kind of public shortcut. Joggers, dog walkers, even some kid on a scooter who waved at me like I was the trespasser. Finally, I'd had enough. I'm lining up that sign, getting ready to stake my claim when I hear car doors slamming in my driveway. 2 cars. My stomach drops. Now, Pine Valley is the kind of place where the biggest crime is usually someone's trash cans not getting rolled back in. So when a black and white cop car parks behind my pickup, I know this is not going to be a good day. Out stepped Officer Miller, tall, lean, with that I've seen too much look in his eye, and his partner, younger guy, probably still thinks he can change the world. And then there's Susan Mitchell, HOA president, 3 years running, clipboard in hand, smile sharper than a kitchen knife. She's strutting up like she owns the place, which, as I would soon learn, is exactly how she thinks. He's trespassing on HOA property, she yells before the officers even get within 10 feet. Honest to God, it's like she's auditioning for Judge Judy. I'm standing there, hammer in one hand, sign in the other, heart pounding, thinking, how in the world can you trespass on land you've owned since before TikTok existed? The cops approach Susan, standing behind them, with that look people get when they know they're about to win. Officer Miller goes, "We've received a complaint you're blocking an established community access road. Do you have documentation of your property boundaries?" I almost laugh, almost. I point to the house, the shed I built, the garden I've sweated over for years. But Susan's got a manila folder thick as a Bible, and she starts laying out papers with county stamps and survey markings. The air gets heavy. This is no casual neighborly complaint. It's an ambush. Susan says the HOA commissioned a boundary review. Some residents weren't notified. This is now community space. I can feel my blood pressure going up. I'm staring at Officer Miller, who's looking at her papers and then back at me. He asks if I have my deed. Of course I say, but my voice sounds weak. I fetch it, and it's like I'm carrying a piece of toilet paper compared to her stack of official documents. Officer Miller looks at both sets' size and says, "Sir, this is a civil matter. You both should resolve this through the appropriate channels. We'll document the complaint." For a second, I'm relieved they're not hauling me off in handcuffs on Susan's word alone. But Officer Williams chimes in, if public access is involved, installing barriers could complicate things. Translation: back off, or this gets worse. Back off, or Susan, with her best "oh, poor you" voice, tells the officers she was just trying to keep things friendly. The irony would be hilarious if I wasn't about to lose my mind. I march inside, dig up my deed, and come back out. Susan leans over, points out, "This deed predates the new community planning updates." I say, "Because those didn't exist when I bought this place, but nobody's listening to me anymore." They leave. Susan thanks the officers, like she's just hosted the PTA, and I'm standing in my yard feeling like the last person at the bus stop, and the bus isn't coming. That's the moment I realize this isn't a misunderstanding. It's a hostile takeover, HOA style. Let me back up 6 months earlier. Susan knocked on my door wearing that same navy blazer, holding a portfolio and talking about community connectivity. She wanted to buy a strip of my backlot for a walking path. Her offer was $30 grand. I nearly spit out my coffee. That patch of land alone was worth 5 times that. I politely declined, and that's when I saw it, a flash of something predatory in her eyes. She said, "You know, Ben, if community planning moves forward without your participation, your property might get isolated." At the time, I laughed it off. Isolated, I thought. What was she going to do? Dig a moat. But then she asked me who used the back of my property. I answered honestly, joggers, dog walkers, nobody regular. She made a note. I didn't know it, but I'd just given her the ammunition she'd used to come after me. Soon after things got weird, I got added to a group chat Pine Valley Safety Committee. Suddenly reminders start going out about using traditional community routes. Messages start popping up. Some residents are concerned about territorial behavior from property owners. And then, the kicker. Familiarize yourself with designated walking areas to ensure access for all. That's when my neighbor Tom calls out, "Mind if I cut through your backyard on my run?" Susan said, "It's part of the community trail." Community trail. That's my grass you're trampling, Tom. But now he looks at me like I'm the problem. Susan had weaponized neighborly courtesy, turned my politeness into permission, my protest into antisocial behavior. Pretty soon every morning is like the Boston Marathon in my backyard. Dog walkers set their bathroom breaks by my hydrangeas. And then there's the Morrison family traipsing through with their 3 kids dropping juice boxes and picking my flowers. I step outside to ask them to stay off my property, and Mrs. Morrison acts like I just kicked her puppy. Susan told us this was a community greenway she huffs, ushering her kids away. So I put up a gentle sign. Private property. Please use sidewalk. 3 days later, Susan shows up at my door with a squad. "Ben, several residents feel your sign is hostile." "Hostile? I'm just asking people not to treat my yard like a public park." Mrs. Clark. I'd spoken to her maybe twice in 15 years, pipes up about inclusive spaces. I could see it in their eyes. Susan's story was winning. That night, my sign was ripped down. I put up a camera. Cue the social media campaign. Posts appear about residents prioritizing territory over community spirit. Concern about surveillance activities. Nobody mentions me by name, but it's clear who the villain is. 3 months later, it's obvious Susan has built a campaign and the entire neighborhood's buying it. Then came the day I woke up to a full-on fitness group stretching in my backyard. 15 people, athletic gear banners, using my fence as a stretching bar. Morning, Ben. Tom shouts, "Beautiful day for community fitness," I tell them. Again, it's private property, and a woman I've never met points to a laminated map. Safety committee updated our pathway. This is the safest route. Later I get a text. "Saw the video of you harassing the walkers. Not a good look." Video. Someone's recorded my confrontation and now I'm the neighborhood bully. Posts online say some people think they own the whole neighborhood. Apparently this route's been used for years. Except it hasn't, but now that's the story. That afternoon there's a knock. It's Betty Richardson, Tom's wife, sweet 70, never one for drama. She brings cookies and a bombshell. Susan's done this before, she whispers. The Hendersons lost land to a community garden, the Johnsons to a playground. Same playbook, official-looking documents, community pressure, legal threats. I leaf through a folder. Betty saved minutes, clippings, emails. Susan would manufacture need, then destroy anyone who resisted. Betty shows me group texts from Susan's inner circle. Ben Thompson resistance, stronger than expected. Need to escalate community pressure. They're orchestrating everything. Fight back, but be smart, Betty says. If you expose her, she's done. 3 days later, a process server hands me an envelope. Community easement enforcement action. 53 pages of legalese. Survey maps proving a walking paths existed since the 60s. 15 affidavits from neighbors. None of it feels real. I call the surveyor. They've never done any historical documentation for Pine Valley. I call the county. No easement on record. The Pine Valley Historical Preservation Society doesn't exist. But the neighbor affidavits are real signatures. They just parrot Susan's timeline and legal jargon. Then Officer Miller calls. "We've received comprehensive documentation from the HOA. Please come in." Susan's evidence is already in the system. My head spins. Even if I prove it's fake, I'll miss the 72-hour deadline to comply. That night, Betty calls. Susan scheduled an emergency HOA meeting. She's invited City Council Legal Affairs and is calling my property a safety hazard for forcing people onto the street. It's a public trial, and Susan's holding all the cards. I start digging. The historic survey maps are a mess. Aerial photos from different decades don't match the story. One from the 70s. Just forest where my yard is now. Easement law says 21 years of continuous use. I find photos of my private property signs from years ago. I call the surveyor again. They confirm the maps are fake, the county seals forgeries. The neighbor affidavits. Turns out Susan held a documentation party, gave them all templates to sign. The deadline ticks down. Susan files extra complaints, noise violations, landscaping issues, illegal surveillance. I'm buried in paperwork, fines, bureaucratic headaches. The agenda for the HOA meeting is posted. It's a formal hearing with City Council review, community input, legal action on the table. Then comes Susan's boldest move. Night before the meeting, I hear something in the yard. 4 figures, flashlights, tools. It's Susan and her crew widening the path, installing stepping stones, even putting up a bench. They disconnect my camera just before finishing. By morning, there's a bronze plaque calling me a community partner, trail markers, and an official sign. Neighbors come by. Looks great. Ben. Glad you embraced the community. Susan claims I agreed to all of it. Shows fake texts as proof. Even the police think I must have worked something out. The meeting that night is packed. Susan takes the podium, glowing with victory, showing before and after pictures, reading fake texts, and getting applause. I connect my phone to the projector. Security footage rolls Susan and her crew, 2 a.m., caught in the act. I show emails from the county, statements from the real surveyor, proof that every official document is a fraud. I highlight neighbor texts where Susan fed them the affidavit language. Betty stands up, waving texts where Susan plotted to destroy me. The room turns. Officer Miller steps up. Mrs. Mitchell, you're being detained for questioning about fraud and conspiracy. City Council suspends the meeting. Neighbors, shocked, begin to apologize. Susan's arrested. Investigation reveals she and her brother-in-law at City Planning created fake organizations, fraudulent documents, and pressured 3 other families. Plea deal, jail, probation, banned from any community office, restitution to the families she targeted. Weeks later, I'm in my backyard, neighbors removing the fake plaques, fixing my garden, restoring what Susan's improvements destroyed. Betty's interim HOA president, Tom's leading the volunteer crew, and the community's drafting new rules for transparency. For the first time in months, I feel something close to peace. Susan's plot was over. My land is mine again, but more importantly, my neighbors have learned what real community is supposed to look like. Respect, honesty, boundaries. And yeah, the new walking group sticks to the actual public trail. So let me ask you, if someone tried to take what you'd built, not with a bulldozer, but with lies, manipulation, and a smile, would you fight back? Or would you just move on and let them win? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your stories about justice, about fighting for what's right, about the fine line between community and control. Because in the end, sometimes the only way to defend what matters is to refuse to surrender it, no matter how many people are lining up to say you should.